So this session we're mainly talking about a business plan. So when you would draft a business plan, why you would do a business plan, what are the things that go into a business plan, that kind of thing. Has anyone ever done a business plan before? Okay, a few? Great. Okay, so we're going to be time tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write up here, I'm going to make this what I like to call a jargon board. So in case I ever slip and we start talking about something that you're like, what is this business jargon? I don't know what she's talking about. And you don't want to interrupt me, but you want to know what it is. Just come up here and write it on the board, whatever word I said. Or, what's your name? I'm sorry?
Sandy.
Sandy. Okay, can I designate you a writer in case, okay, so in case folks don't want to come up here, just slip Sandy a note and Sandy will come up and write it. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay. So, business plan. Who's excited? Yeah? Okay, let's try again. Business plan. Okay, so honestly, business plans are super scary, right? I mean, people talk about business plans like it's gonna be this super fat document and books, and they are sometimes, but not usually, to be honest. Okay, the real purpose of a business plan, who? For who? Who's it really for? Who are you writing the business plan for? Right? I haven't heard the answer yet. Yay, who said that? Yay, me. You're writing it for you. You're the main reason. Oftentimes we're prompted by a bank, prompted by a lender, prompted by a granting agency, but the real reason you're doing a business plan is for you. So that means that like the top 10 questions that I get, how long does it have to be? Does it have to include this section? Does it have to do this? I don't know, does it? You tell me. Do you need that or do you not? Okay? So I want to start with that framing. And what I would say to a bunch of storytellers is that a business plan is really about you telling your story. Okay? So you're used to telling other people's stories. This is about you telling yours and you telling the story of your business. Okay? So now are we like super excited about business plan? Woo! Okay, great. See, I told you guys I would convert you all to small business junkies with me. Okay, so for those that are joining us online later who have no idea who this lady is standing up here, we are all best friends already, but for those joining us anew, my name is Rebecca Soon. I'm here with my colleague Paula McCutcheon. We're with Solutions Pacific, and basically our goal is to try to help small businesses across the state of Hawaii be as successful as you can be. So whatever that means, we're here to try to be a resource. We're just wanting to be your back-end support and be a small piece of the amazing work that you're doing in community. So we get off by you guys being successful in the work that you're doing. Okay? All right. So we talked a little bit in the last session about entrepreneurship. We talked a little bit about kind of the flow of an idea. And I just kind of want to reframe us around that. So a business plan can be written for a business, hence the name, but it also can be written for an idea, for a plan, right? I mean, you can approach a business plan from any way you want. You can think about it as a storyboard. You can really approach a business plan from any perspective, and it can be done for anything. So, for example, individual product lines within businesses also often have their own business plan. When a business is expanding, they'll often do a new business plan or they'll amend their existing business plan. A new DBA, a new project, right? A new film. All of these things can have their own individual business plans for that thing. So it's not just for the overall business, it's something you can apply, whether it's a project, whether it's a business, whether it's just a nutty concept that you want to get on paper before your brain has to go back to the thing that you're working on that day. Okay? So what's all the hype about? Basically, these are things that we kind of, if we step back, sort of might know innately, but the goal of a business plan is to help make sure that you are thinking, through every step and every piece of your business or of your project. That's it. That's the goal. So there's sort of standard sections, and we're going to go through each standard section, and you should have gotten a worksheet where we're actually going to have you start writing some ideas or bullets down for what you might put into those sections. But really those prompts are just to make sure that you're thinking about the things that everybody else is going to be thinking about when they're looking at it, and that aren't going to catch you by surprise later. Okay, so it is good to have external review on it, because people will start asking you questions. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Take that, internalize it, and say, okay, I'm not communicating something. I've missed some piece. Let me go flesh that out. Right? Probably everybody in here has written a business plan. It's just written in your head. Yeah. So a lot of this is about writing it on paper, getting it down, and then the pukas, instead of being scared of the pukas and being like, oh, I'll figure that out later, it's like, oh no, wait, there's a blank space on the paper. I gotta write something. So you actually forces you to start thinking about that, okay? Pricing. Oh my gosh. Pricing is like a mini breakdown for almost any business, a new business that I work with. How do I price my time? How do I price our project? How do I price this widget? It's crazy. So most of the folks that we do, what do you think they do with pricing?
Look at other people.
I wish, girl, I wish. Most people, before they come to us, they just ignore it. They're just like, oh, I just won't think about it. I'll just leave it blank. Oh, I'll ask them how much they want to pay for this. No. Let's not ignore the stuff that scares us. Let's force ourselves to think through it. It also helps to make sure that all of your team members are on the same page, right? So just it helps to align vision, right? If everyone's contributing, and that's why I say this is done for you, not for someone else, because so a lot of times people want to hire someone else to write their business plan for them. Like, oh, who can I hire to write my business plan? And that has reasons why sometimes that's necessary, but in general, I don't think that has nearly the amount of value that it has if you do it yourself. Because if you're doing it yourself, you're forcing yourself to think through all these questions, and you make it a team exercise. I mean, it can be something that you do around poo-poos and beer. It doesn't have to be all formal, but have it be something that as a team, you're sitting down and answering some of these questions together, forcing some maybe difficult conversations that you maybe were avoiding for a while, and saying, okay, do we agree that what we've written here is reflective of what we're trying to do? Okay. All right. It also just shows your vision at startup. But I would say that good business plans are updated every couple of years, right? Because who you are has changed. The market has changed. Your product has changed. Your goals have changed. Your mission may have even changed or been refined somehow. Okay, so good business plans are things that you constantly revisit. And then it is a way to communicate what's in your head onto Pippa for somebody else. Because sometimes they don't have 3.5 hours to sit with us and walk through our amazing idea in our head, right? And they don't even know the questions that they want to ask. So we'll think of all the questions you might possibly want to ask for you and put it in this pretty little document. I'm still going to walk you through it, don't worry, but here it is for you to read later, okay? Some guiding principles. Writing it down is really important. I mean, I sometimes when I get to this point in the conversation with folks and I say this is really for you, they're like, oh, well then I got it, it's in my head. No. We want to write it down, right? So we can revisit it, come back to it, share it with others. We talked about how important it is to update it. You do want to get feedback. So have it be something that you share with your family, with your friends, with each other, with others, with business folks, with folks in the industry, with folks that are possibly consumers. Share it, get some feedback, right? They'll guarantee that if someone takes the time to read through it, one, you know that they're invested in you and in your business, but two, they're gonna have some idea that you didn't think of. They're gonna have some piece that's gonna help you improve it, okay? And then embrace guessing. So there inevitably, especially when it comes to the finances, there always comes this like, I don't really know. I'm not really sure exactly what it's gonna be. That's okay, guess. Make as informed of a guess as you can, put that on paper, and then you're gonna come back, right, and refine it. So it'll be okay. But you gotta start you can't just skip the stuff that's scary because you're not sure exactly what's gonna happen. So these are sort of the big chunks that are often found in a business plan. And if you wanna actually pull out the worksheet that has, do I have ones? Could I borrow this for just one moment? So it's this worksheet. It'll basically just be asking you it's like a bunch of data fields. Okay, so for those that are tuning in that don't have this, We're basically just taking this, you can take the slides and you can turn them into an outline, okay? All right, thank you. So first is sort of like the basics. Who are we? What do we do? What are we doing? Oftentimes, especially when we're used to being in like a single solitary industry, we jump real quick to forgetting that our audience often has no idea what we're talking about within that industry. Okay, so sometimes backing up a little and saying, oh, are you, for example, we get a lot of folks that are just jump right to, oh, I make t-shirts. Okay, do you make t-shirts for consumers? Do you make them wholesale? Do you print your own? Do you buy, like, where is that? But there's this assumption of, oh, I make t-shirts. That means the same thing to you and me. Not to me, I don't know. Do you like sew t-shirts? Because that would be very hireable for me right now. It's hard to find good seamstresses. Second is like, tell me a little bit more about your product. So what is your product? Where does it fit in the marketplace? Tear your product apart. Be honest about what's good and bad about your product. So if you're a service provider, if you're someone who, if you're a writer, if you're a filmmaker, you know, be honest about these are my skill sets. These are skill sets of my partners that I can bring to the table. And then this is maybe what we don't do so well, but we're happy to refer you to somebody who does do it well. Be real clear about exactly what it is that you do and don't. What your product is and what it's not is often just as important as what it is. Who's your market? Who are you selling to? And oftentimes we have different markets, right? So we have maybe a product that we have to sell to a funder in order to get funding and support for it. But then there's a slightly different product that we're selling to maybe a more refined market that we're maybe selling services to. And then there's our ultimate consumer who maybe isn't paying for it, but the person who's paying for it is only paying for it because the consumer wants to see it, right? So they're often like different people that are all part of the process, that are all stakeholders in whether or not our product is going to ultimately be received well. So thinking and talking about who all is in that marketplace, right? Who else is talking to those funders? Who else is talking to those consumers, those viewers, right? And competitor analysis. This is the part that, for some reason, gets real hard because we all think that our product is what? The best, unique, amazing, right? And it probably is all of those things. But to a consumer, a hat company and another hat company and another hat company, or a film company and another film company, and they're not buying from 10 different ones, right? They're maybe buying from one. The example I like to share with folks, the question I like to ask folks is, okay, if I was opening a Mexican restaurant, who would you, in Hawaii, who would you say is my competitors?
The Mexican restaurant, it's called that.
The one on School Street. Their Lihimoy martinis are like bomb.
I'd say your number one competitor is
Taco Bell, yeah. Mm-hmm, yep. Their funny little hot sauce packets.
Chronic Taco, yes.
Chronic Taco, okay, mariachi. Okay, does anybody have any other ideas that are slightly different than what's being shared? Maybe that aren't Mexican restaurants? Sorry? Vaughn's Fried Chicken. Okay, why is that a competitor?
It's in the same vein. A lot of times
Okay.
some fried food. Whenever
Okay, so fried food. Okay. Any other thoughts? So let's put that question to the side for a second and say, okay, if you were out to go get dinner, what is the criteria about where you're gonna go buy dinner?
Parking.
Is there parking?
Price.
How much does it cost? Atmosphere. Can I get it to go? Location. Is it near me? Is it near where I'm going? How convenient is it?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, okay. Yeah, what do other people say? Okay.
The food is edible.
Is it good? Is this food good, like a baseline? So, I think that what I'm trying to illustrate here is that when we think about our business, oftentimes we're thinking about like who else is doing just what we're doing. But the real question that we gotta ask to understand whether our consumers are gonna buy or consume our item is, what is their need that they're trying to fill? Sometimes, yeah, I really want Mexican food tonight. But most times, it's just, you need food. right? And what's nearby, what has parking, what can I get takeout, what's convenient, what's edible, right? Those are the questions that I'm asking. And so then you start broadening it to, well, shoot, if I'm opening a Mexican food restaurant, my competitors are not just Mexican food restaurants, my competitors are any place that anyone's gonna go get food. Supermarket is my competitor, right? I might not think about that because it seems like, oh, we're in totally different industries. I am so different than Whole Foods. OMG, Down to Earth is totally not Whole Foods. I mean, I'm sure there are people that work there that think that, but do most people probably go to either one or the other? Are they probably competitors for most of us? Yeah, right? So I encourage people when you're at this section thinking about your competitor analysis, who is competing for your customer, right? Step in the shoes of your customer. What are they looking for, okay? And then having a marketing plan of action, and then lastly, the financial section. We're actually starting to paint the picture fiscally of what is this gonna look like, okay? All right, so pull out your worksheets, and we're gonna start super simple. Cover page. Go ahead and write down what you know so far, what you have so far. And we know, right, that these first 4 things we have to have just to form, right? So these will force us real fast to start thinking about, okay, what do I want it to be named, or at least for now? And who am I? Is it me? Is it me and my spouse? Is it me and my buddies? Is it me and these other companies? Who are the owners? And then what did we say last time we want to do when we list the owners? What do we want to include? Percentage, yeah. Go ahead.
Is there a process for registering a logo? Or is there a meaning of what is the,
Well,
you
this is-
want to
yeah.
make sure that your logo is not, well, interfering
Yeah.
with anybody else's, but
Yep.
it is yours, and nobody can take it.
Sure, so there are copyright and trademark laws that can help protect in the case of logos. And to be really honest with you, it's so far outside of my expertise area, so I don't want to go too far into it. But I know that there is a PIC trainer who does specifically practice in this area, so I'll connect Leanne and you to her. But the generality is, yeah, there are processes to protect your logo. And the need depends on the individual business, right? In our case, we didn't feel that our logo needed to have a trademark protection. We're not worried about someone stealing our logo. It doesn't have a ton of intrinsic value in and of itself. So it's not mandatory. Up to the individual. Others, are super tight about their logo, right? I don't even think you can have something that looks like the shadow of Mickey Mouse's head without getting sued by Disney and getting a cease and desist order. So it just depends. They're also larger. Yeah, I mean, for them, they feel like that shadow has value, has intrinsic value. So it depends on the business. Thank you. Okay? So for the stuff you don't know yet, but you know you're going to need to know, go ahead and circle it. So you can hold yourself accountable later to go back and say, what was I missing? What do I need to go back? Okay? So an executive summary, like most executive summaries, is often done last to kind of summarize what the tight picture is. But the idea of an executive summary is really to say, okay, very succinctly, what are the highlights? How do I paint a picture? How do I tell the story to somebody else that's reading this? And this is often for clients that we work with that are applying for loans that need business plans to be submitted. We oftentimes spend a lot of time on this executive summary. So for folks who think that you're going to use your business plan to apply for a loan or to get financing from an investor, then I think that oftentimes everybody has sort of different things that they care about Some care more about the marketing, some care more about the finances, and everyone cares about different things. Sometimes they only kind of read those sections, but most of them will at least read your executive summary because it'll give them kind of an overall picture. So we try to do something in the overall picture that is as tight as it possibly can be to paint the picture of the rest of the plan. And this is where we encourage people to let your passion show. Right? So this is where you might play with your words a lot and spend time, like especially in the case of a lot of lenders, you're submitting a business plan to them, and the underwriter you may not ever meet. So the person who's actually making the decision on your loan is not necessarily the person that you're sitting there and talking to. So this is sometimes the only way to show them, this is who I am. Now, I know that there are a lot of folks in creative space that do a business plan that is not a written plan. Do video business plans, do things that are, they can pull up like oftentimes it's video, but it integrates multimedia in a more interesting way. And so it's a way that the business plan itself becomes a showing of what the work is, but then also tells the story that way. I think that that's fine as well. Some lenders will still want a paper plan, but thinking about how you want to tell your story, I think, is an important thing. I mean, how much time do you spend like agonizing over every detail of how to tell the stories of our community, right? Don't be afraid to do that for yourself. Really spend time thinking about how you want to tell your own story. Not to the point where you never like open it and do it, but invest the time. Take that day a week to work on the business, not in the business. Okay, next let's go to vision. Go ahead and write down what you think your mission statement is if you have one. Or if you don't have an exact mission statement, like what's your theme? What are the words that come to mind when you think about why you're doing this? And if you have a specific goal, if you have a specific plan, what is that? I want to create a multi-platform experience around this topic within the next 12 months. Right? It's like super defined goal. Oh, I have one. I want to create an app that allows people to integrate into Yelp that easily says whether or not their business is locally owned within the next 12 months. I always forget the time part of SMART goals. That's what I've been wanting to do for like 10 years. This is where you would then start fleshing out, okay, what are the steps that need to be taken in order to meet those goals? So you start breaking down, right, from your mission to a vision to specific goals to objectives that you need to hit within those goals, okay? But at the basic, what you're really just saying is, what do you want to do? When do you want to do it by? How are you going to get it done? Okay, so any of those questions that you didn't do or you don't know, go ahead and circle them so that you can keep yourself accountable to come back to them. Okay, next section. Who are your business owners? Go ahead and write that down. What are you doing business as?
And that's defined.
What's defined?
Like, is that type of business you're in?
Oh no, doing business as is the name that you're doing it as. So for example, our company's name is solution specific, but maybe we're doing business as Badass Workshops. So it's a trade name. Sorry, Olelo, if I wasn't allowed to say that. I was? Okay, good, thank you. Sorry, you were gonna ask a question though?
So is that really what you're doing business as?
No.
That's super good.
Thanks.
And you say those names are,
You can make them up as you go? or
Yep, you can make them up as you go.
As many as you want?
As many as you want, yep. But what you probably want to do is you probably want to register them as trade names with the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs so that nobody else can use them. So it's a form, I don't remember the name of the form, I think it's like X10 or something like that. But there's a form with DCCA that you can file to register the trade name. And basically that trade name becomes owned by the business. So it's not a separate business, it's just I'm doing business as this. So checks can be made out to that. Legally, you can do business as that. Yeah. And then other people, then you're sort of on record as saying, because oftentimes in the intellectual property world, when you have conflict, it's about who was using that first. So if you filed the trade name with the state of Hawaii, then you can say, at least in Hawaii, that you were doing it, you were using that name as of the state. So you have proof that you were the one using that name. So if someone else later starts using it, and there's a debate as to like who owns this, one of the things that's looked at is, well, who registered it? Yeah. When did that happen? You can say, oh, on August 31st, are we still in August? On August 31st, 2019, we registered Badass Workshops, and so we own that. Okay. What category of goods and services? This is just real broad, like what industry are you in? And then is there a sub-industry, right? Media is huge, right? There's lots of different industries within, yeah.
So going back to when you register that name with the DCCA, the trade name, and then you register it only in Hawaii, so somebody in California can use it?
In California, yeah. So you could register it in other places, other states as well. And there's probably a federal patent or system, but I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. Yeah.
When you have a non-fictitious
Mm-hmm.
business title,
Mm-hmm.
which means it's your name.
Mm-hmm.
What if someone shares your name? Your name?
I think that becomes, so you're legally allowed to use your name for your person, but if you want to be able to use it for the purposes of doing business, then it would come down to who registered it first, or who was doing that business first. That's my understanding. Not being an intellectual property attorney, that's my understanding. Yeah. So again, that's where it becomes important to go to GCCA. If we're talking about the state of Hawaii, check what names are already registered. And I mean, there's been lots of examples of folks over time that have lost the rights to their names because it was connected to their business. One of the most famous ones for me growing up, does everyone remember Famous Amos cookies? So Wally Amos, the name Amos, as a part of Famous Amos, was sold as a part of that business. And so when he sold the remaining parts of the business, he no longer had a right to use the name. And that was a contentious thing that went on for years. He then opened a company called Uncle No Name Cookies, Uncle No Name Cookies. Yeah, and so it's something to think about real seriously if your personal name is important as a part of the business.
I also heard Mary Tyler Moore can use her.
Really? I don't know. By the way, Uncle Wally Amos does still make cookies and does still have a business here in Hawaii, and please go and buy his cookies because they're amazing. Yeah. He's awesome. Shout out to Uncle Wally Amos. Okay, who are the team members and what's their roles going to be? Okay. Some of this stuff seems real simple, but it's, again, a lot of it is about getting it in your head, putting it down on paper. So go ahead and write down, okay, put your name first. That's the easy one. What's your role going to be? What's your job in the business? Not what's your title, but what's your kuleana? What are you doing? Are you the creative? Are you the back end? You're probably gonna be everything from the janitor to the CPA in the beginning, but what's your responsibility? And then who else is in the team and what do they do? In the beginning, when things are gelling real good, it's real easy to not have to have this written down and you just kind of know what everyone's kuleana is. But as things sometimes, especially you get into projects, I mean, this is not shocking, right, that there are projects. We all, I'm sure, can point to some where people are stepping on each other's toes, fighting over whose role is what, right? So it's good to kind of have it be on the same page, literally, because you're writing it down on the page. Yeah, I'm glad I got one laugh. And then lastly, what do you think your legal structure is going to be? Go ahead and write that down. For those who are possibly using business plans to apply for loans, you might consider including a copy of your certificate of good standing, which you can get with DCCA, or your certificate of vendor compliance, which you can get if you have a profile like we went through earlier through Hawaii Compliance Express. Then that basically says that you're compliant with Department of Labor of Industrial Relations, DCCA, and with Department of Taxation, and you can print out a certificate of vendor compliance. And I just include for all of our clients, just include it with your package, because usually what they'll do is they'll say, oh, you're approved subject to this. Then you gotta go provide that. I'm just like, just give it to them. Show them up front that you're legit, you know what you're doing, you got a business, boom, boom, boom. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Does inexpensive quality CPA or lawyer attorney exist?
Yeah, I mean, there are CPAs that charge like $35 to $50 an hour for their time, which I think is pretty inexpensive. And then again, if you go to the, I'm blanking on the name, the BAC, the Business Action Center at Nimitz, they actually have lawyers that are there like a day a week, and you can sit and talk with them for free. So at least they can kind of give you some guidance about, do you really need to hire a lawyer for this, or is some basic information going to be enough?
Can you repeat
Yeah.
that, please?
Sure.
Where is it?
It's called the Business Action Center, and it's run by the DCCA, the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, and they're on Nimitz. I don't know the address offhand, but they're open during normal business hours during the work week, and they're there as a resource for all kinds of things, but they also do bring in lawyers periodically where folks can make appointments, sit with them, and ask questions.
I think they're on the second floor in the middle.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so go ahead and start writing down some of what your product is. And your product could be a physical thing, which we usually call a good. So like, I'm gonna borrow this. Products, a good, right? Tangible, physical item, good. We just asked about CPA and legal services. Those are services, right? So some of what you create might be a good, like a video, article. Some of what you create might be a service, right? Offering your film service, your creative ideas, your time, right? And some things are both. They're mixed, right? So it seems super simple, but oftentimes we sit with clients who are doing mock pitches. We do mock pitches to folks when they're going to go see like someone they want to partner with, or a potential client of theirs, and they kind of go straight to describing the work that they've done. But oftentimes clients like, okay, wait, hold on, what are you even selling me? What do you even do? Right? So it seems real simple, but backing it up to as simple as, this is the kind of service that we provide. Right? So for example, we have a lot of construction companies who immediately just start talking about what kind of construction projects that they're currently working on, or we can do all your construction needs. You say, okay, but do you do retail or commercial? Oh, we only residential or commercial? Oh, we only do residential. Oh, okay. So that's a good word to include, residential construction, right? oh, we only do projects that are 10 units or more. Okay, that's a good word to include, right? So how do we start like really refining what we're talking about? Okay. What stage in the life cycle? So oftentimes you're not necessarily someone who touches the product from beginning to end, right? Maybe you're primarily hired as like an editor. Is that a thing? Do people just get hired as editors? Okay, so you're not touching the product from the very beginning. You're touching it at a certain stage in the life cycle of that product. Okay, so helping to explain like where you live in the product creation. Okay. This is where you're gonna start fleshing out things like what kind of stuff do you need to buy in order to do what you do. So you maybe need to buy certain services. Maybe you have to buy, maybe you're a filmmaker who doesn't do the editing. Is that a thing too? Yeah, okay. So it's a healthy thing, okay. So maybe it's okay, I know that I need to hire an editor, right? Those are like a typical vendor I'm gonna have to go to. Or I need to hire a studio. It's a typical vendor I'm gonna need to use, okay? So start thinking about and listing out who are some of the other people that you need to bring in to be able to sell your good, to create your good. Pricing list. So this is where I start getting like real fuzzy real fast. How do you price stuff? And so I think it was said earlier that one of the ways that we absolutely look to is how do other people in a similar industry, doing similar things to what you're doing, how do they price it? Both in terms of the amount that they price it at, but also just how do they structure it? So a lot of folks that come to us on the service side, they're new to being consulting. They're like, okay, maybe they worked for a firm for a long time and now they're branching out on their own and they don't have any, like how do I even present myself to someone? Do I want a retainer? Do I charge an hourly? Do I charge flat fee? So sometimes just understanding how things are priced within that market so that when you're going to clients, they kind of get the structure, right? Is it based off of, sales? Is it some commission based? Is it just flat? Is it based on, it's hard to say everything is custom. I mean, you can, but it's from a client purchasing perspective. It's really hard to understand, okay, are you going to be affordable or ridiculously expensive, right? And I'll be honest, I've bought filmmaking services over time, and I almost always get totally depends, custom, we got to spend 4 hours with you before I can give you a rough idea of how things are priced. I think that to a non-film community buyer, there would be some value in being able to kind of give ranges, being able to kind of be a little bit like, okay, this is how we normally price things, but if you're really interested, let's spend some time and then I can give you a custom quote. Okay, so go ahead and write down how you think you're gonna price things. Are you gonna price things hourly? Are you gonna price things per minute of film? Is that a thing? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's very valid because we all struggle with that. Like, I think the custom thing is a lot of times you don't want people running around asking, like, nickel and diming you.
Sure.
Asking around, because I don't want those kind of clients. Like,
I get that, yeah.
I don't like turning business away, but they're going to bug you the whole time about everything. So, in your experience, that price range, does that kind of help avoid that?
Yep.
And then it's just like, hey, they give you a cheaper price. Okay, well, if you want to sit down and talk, we can see
Yep.
what your price would be,
I think
Not
a range is helpful.
dime store.
Yeah, I think a range is helpful. I think here's a couple of sample projects we did, and then give them a rough estimate of how much those were. I'm sorry? A menu can be helpful too, yeah. I mean, I think that in my experience, I think that people know when you're buying creative that you're not gonna be able to just cookie cutter buy something. So I don't think you have to go all that far. But I do think it's hard to just say, contact us without any parameters. I think giving some general can be helpful.
That's exhausting. If they don't have the price and you've never met them and you're just like, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yep. And I think if you said something like, here's a range, here's a couple sample projects, but we'll only give a quote once we've met with you. Let us know if this range works. Then we'll sit with you and we'll give you a specific to your circumstance. Yeah. Okay. And if you don't know how you're going to price, write down who are you going to look to see how they price things. Okay. So at least you have a next step for yourself. You're not just ignoring it. Okay. And if you have no idea, then circle it and we'll come back to it. Then circle it so you can hold yourself accountable to come back to it. This would be if you have any or if you need any. Sorry, I don't know where the question. Yeah. So I think that what you would be putting in a business plan is, do you have any existing or do you need any regarding the product? Yeah.
What's the last one? The last one.
Oh, what need? So we talked earlier about being consumer focused on what is it that your product is addressing. So as opposed to just talking all day about what we are wanting to do and create, what need are you fulfilling for people? Is it a need to be educated? Yeah, it is your product. Yeah. And then need is your customer need or your client need. What need are you addressing? What are you fulfilling? Is it their desire to be entertained? Is it a desire to be educated? Is it a desire to eat edible food? What's the need we're addressing? Okay. And then when you think that you have sort of fleshed out on paper as close as you can to what your product is, and you want to start testing that. This is sort of a product life cycle. This is like when you're actually creating a good and you start putting it out to market and you test it. But I like to apply this to ideas and services and concepts as well. So when you think you have a somewhat fleshed out idea, start testing it. Give it to your friends and family, your honest friends and family, not your I want free stuff friends and family. Paula always says, real friends play rack. Real friends will pay your price. They won't ask you for discounts. But you can give them free stuff if they're going to give you really valuable feedback. But test it out. Test it out among people that are outside of your network, right? Test it out among people in this room, right, who have gone through the same class and understand what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? Then we price it, market it, you put it out, and then that's where you refine it and come back, right? And this is a natural process that we always do, right? Because if someone doesn't like your product, you're going to go back and refine it. But this process should be done purposefully, not just, okay, let's try. We'll just try adjust it on the next one. But actually sit down and think about what worked, what didn't, how do we need to adjust. So I want to take a couple minutes, turn to someone sitting around you. You can do a group of 3, you can do a group of 2, and we're going to do some product testing. Okay? So share some idea. Share what you know so far about what it is, what you're creating, what's the need. If you're listening, and you don't know what the need is, ask what need is that addressing, who's your customer. Go back to the questions that we just filled out and prompt folks if they're not answering some of that, okay? So let's go ahead and take like 3 to 4 minutes to do that. You guys do it outside too. Okay, let's go ahead and come back. Any takeaways? Anybody have any cool takeaways about your idea? Pukas that you were able to kind of talk through or think through? Things you weren't expecting? There's a lot of rich conversation going on. Okay, so this is an exercise, right, that you folks can do, right, with each other. You can do with others. You can ask your friends and family to help you with, right? Help workshop your ideas, basically, right? Create sort of purposeful spaces to workshop your ideas. Okay, cool. So in your business plan, you want to spend a little bit of time talking about who your customer is, both who's buying and who's consuming, which sometimes is the same thing and sometimes is not, right? Especially for your industry. Sorry, I told you I'm not tech. I'm not tech. Okay, so identifying who your target markets are, what are they looking for? What are the needs or the wants that you're helping to address? Who do you think you're going to be reaching through your target market? So is it businesses, is it individuals? Okay. We talked earlier about identifying who your key competitors are. Trying to be honest about what their strengths and weaknesses are. And yes, okay, we're all amazing, they all are not amazing. Got it. So beyond that, try to be honest about sort of who are other people that are feeling the same need, right? Who are addressing the same need. What do they have? What are they missing? Okay. And then what makes what you're doing different, which we call differentiation. Okay. But what's different about what you're providing? And not everything has to be like purely unique, right? I mean, there are a lot of very successful businesses out there who do the exact same thing as their very successful competitors, right? There's space in the market for people to do similar things. That's okay too. But what about if someone was saying like, oh, okay, everyone, all photographers, great, you're in the photography space, great. Okay, but what's unique about the photography work that you do? Is there something? Is it the perspective you're coming from? Is it that you have a specialty maybe in commercial versus in editorial versus in, I'm making things up, but
Good.
great. Okay. Okay.
Can that be your values, like what you
Of course.
bring to the table versus
Other.
Yes, but I would say, do more than just say what your value is.
Yeah.
Like we are community based. That's a potential value, right? We speak from the lens of our community. But how does that manifest itself into your product?
Yeah.
And how does that manifest itself into your process? How does that manifest itself into what your client's buying? So what are they going to get out of the fact that you have a community-based value model? Maybe they're going to get input along the way from community. They're going to get buy-in. They're going to get a richer product, right? Connection. Like how does it manifest? So we all have values that we hold dear, that we want the whole world to adopt and share. And sometimes you find the perfect client that is totally value and mission aligned, and that's always the goal. But sometimes I think that it's on us, for those of us that are trying to bring others into our community, to translate our values into their values and understand and care about their values. Yeah. So I think that going beyond saying, here's our values, and saying, here's how our values help you.
Yeah.
Here's how our values will make a better product for you. Okay? Okay. And then honing down, especially when your consumers are different than your clients. So meaning the people who are watching or reading or absorbing things, when it's different than the people who are actually paying for that, right? So especially important to kind of flesh out who are both stakeholder groups. Okay, what do they care about? What are they interested in? Okay, so especially when you're when you're using your business plan externally, so for funders or for investors, it'll be important to include some kind of information about your credentials, basically. Like, who are you? Why is this something that they should believe that you're able to do? Okay. Yes, please.
Now, is this process the same for a grant? If I'm applying for a grant, is it going to be different wording? Or is my mission different applying for that kind of money?
Yeah, it totally depends on the grant. But what I would say is that most grants are looking for something similar. They're looking for you to tell your story. Who are you? What's your experience? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How are we going to measure how you do it? And how do we know that you have the experience to pull it off? So it's going to be very similar in many respects, but there will be pieces about it that are different. I mean, I think one of the things that in the grant spaces that I work in, it's very frustrating when the grant asks a very specific question and you just get like a data dump of stuff that kind of relates to the question, to the topic of the question. You want to make sure that you've been thoughtful about what question are they actually answering. So I wouldn't just, while you might start with a copy and paste as a first draft from your business plan or from another grant that you've written, I would then go back and hone it down. So like, what exactly are they asking? What are they trying to get at? And tailor. I think next week's workshop is going to go in depth though into PIC's grants, specifically, what they're looking for. Okay? So if you know these things, go ahead and write them down on your worksheet. Oh. So SWOT analysis would be your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is an analysis you're doing on yourself. And it's also something you could do on your competitors as well as a part of your market analysis. But strengths. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. So on the left side, some people go up, down, some people go right, left. But on the left side, this is kind of like an analysis of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Right? So this is more about evaluating your business. Okay. Opportunities and threats. Opportunities can be things that are coming up in the industry. For example, maybe there's a gap in the industry where nobody knows how to, I don't know, use some like new technology that's coming online.
Could be
right?
virtual presence.
Virtual presence, okay. There you go. So there's an opportunity because no one has really like owned that space yet. That's an opportunity, right? A threat is maybe that you're overly reliant on it. Maybe your weakness, one of your weaknesses is you're over reliant on a certain technology that's becoming outdated, right? Technology is moving beyond you, beyond where you are. That's a threat, right? So it's kind of just, it's a way to say, okay, where are we today? What's good, what's going well, what's not going so well, and what's coming up line? How do we position our strengths and weaknesses to go after the opportunities, minimize the threats? Okay? Helpful? See some nods, some confused eyes. Any questions? Okay. And then regulatory framework is, what's the regulatory framework you operate in? So some industries are very highly regulated, some are not. Some you have to have, union labor, for example, on some jobs or with some clients, some you don't. So what are the legal frameworks that you're operating within? Knowing what kinds of things do you need a license for, right? There's some jobs you can only do if you have licenses or if you have apprenticeship backgrounds. Anybody can legally do it. Whether or not they can actually do it is a different question, but anyone could legally do it. Okay. And again, if there's things that you aren't sure, but you're going to need to think about, circle so that you hold yourself accountable and come back to it. Okay. How are you going to reach your customers? So in this sense, I would focus on your client, like who's buying your services or who's buying your goods. How are you reaching them? Are you going to go and pound the pavement and knock on doors? Are you going to put up a website and do advertising towards it? Are you going to go to events and trade shows? How are you reaching who you're trying to sell to? Okay, who buys your stuff? Okay. And if you have sample brochures or sample like a website that you've already created, go ahead and put it in your business plan so that way if someone sees it, or even if you're coming back to it later, you kind of know like where you were at that time. Okay, in your pricing and in your business plan, you want to try to provide at least some sense of pricing, which I know we talked a little bit about earlier, but basically, how are you structuring your pricing? Again, are you doing something hourly? Are you doing it per product? Are you responding to contracts that others are putting out? And it's going to depend, right, whether or not you're retailing, so someone's directly buying like subscriptions, or they're directly buying a license, or they're directly purchasing your services, versus if you're wholesaling it. So you're selling something in bulk that they're then turning around and selling. That'll be priced differently. A lot of this is for goods, more relevant to goods. Okay, I'm gonna skip the expansion stuff just because we're running tight on time. But we talked a little bit earlier that if you were gonna be going into an expansion, especially if you're gonna be looking to borrow or get investors for expansion, that's a good time to update your business plan. So you have the slides, so these are just some of the things that these are some of the ways in which you might be expanding. So greater capacity, would be picking up additional supply, picking up additional equipment, right? This was Kona Brewery when they picked up some of their additional facilities. They picked up a bunch of new equipment, but they also, as a result, were able to bring their pricing down, right? So quantities of scale, they were able to leverage it with their Kona location. So sometimes it's just about telling that story. New markets. So it could be that you're going into new things that you haven't done before. So maybe maybe you've done shorts, but you want to do a full length, right? Maybe you've done a piece of the industry and you want to pick up other parts, things that could be complementary, things that could be totally different. I think the example we have here, I don't know if you folks know Fitted. So a few years ago, they started doing only retail, and then they expanded to do wholesale and licensing. So we worked with them through their expansion when they went from their retail outfit and sort of shifting their business something complementary but different, where now they were partnering with other organizations doing cross collaborations on products to move from the retail to the wholesale space. Okay, and then these are just some of the, as you're workshopping ideas, if you're talking about expansion, some of the questions you want to think about, ask about. These are a lot of them from a lender perspective. So from a risk mitigation perspective, from a how do we know that this expansion is right for your next step. Okay. And then from a financial perspective, these are just some of the things that we encourage folks to use as principles to try to limit risk going through an expansion. It is absolutely a thing that you can grow too fast. That's a thing that can happen. And so managing growth, managing expansion is really important. So for those that either are at that point or maybe at that point one day, just remember, like, this is awesome, this is great, but let's just make sure we pause and think through what we're doing. Okay, so the final section, and the one that people, I will say, are the least fond of, is gonna be your financials, okay? And so like every part of the business plan, you can go really in depth or you can go light touch. But what I beg of you is just don't ignore this section, okay? Gotta at least do some degree of forward-looking planning of your financials. Some degree of backward-looking, like where are you? And then some degree of forward-looking, like, okay, how are we gonna finance this project? How are we gonna finance the business? What's the cash flow timing gonna look like? Some degree of planning and mapping it out, okay? From a perspective of a lender though, so for those that are, again, using this for either lending or for investors, this is one of the most important sections. So all the more reason why you really can't ignore it. It's important to a lender that you have a clear understanding of what your revenues and expenses are. Because that's what you gotta know to know if you're making money. Seems real simple, but most, I won't say most, but many of the clients that we work with, when I ask the question, are you profitable? They tell me how much money they made. That's not whether or not you're profitable. Then I ask, okay, but did you make profit? For most the answer is, I don't know, honestly. And that's not it's not a judgment. It's just that's that's math. That's where we are in terms of we're focusing on our products, right? So what I try to do is help folks step back a little bit, focus on, like, are we setting you up so that you're going to actually be able to continue doing this work? Are we setting you up so that you're like in the red and you're going to have to close and do something else in 5 years? I want to set you up so that you can keep doing this, right? So we got to have these like uncomfortable conversations about finances. But having a clear grasp of understanding, like, what money are you bringing in? What money are you paying out? And what's your profitability? And it could be negative. That's okay. Some lenders are fine with that as long as you kind of understand where it is. What are you doing to make up that? Are you personally lending? Are you getting people to give you things on spec? Okay. So when we're presenting this information externally, oftentimes you're going to get, especially for loans, be asked for two major things. One is a pro forma, which is essentially a forward-looking income statement. And the second is, how are you going to use this money? Just a breakdown of what, line by line, what is this specific money you're asking for going to be used for? Okay? And we're going to go into a couple of sample income statements and pro formas. So other things, other tools are if you use budget, if you have cash flow statements. Cash flow is a little bit different than income because cash flow actually tracks like when the money comes in, when it goes out, which might be a little bit different than what your overall month by month profit looks like. But your pro forma statement is, in my opinion, really, really important. So about 80% of businesses fail within the first 3 years. 80%. And I don't share that to scare you. I share that to say that it's really important that we plan. And one of the biggest reasons for failure, I think we all probably know, is just cash flow, right? It takes a little while, and people say like, oh, is there some average number of how long it takes to be profitable? Not really, to be honest. It's very, very different depending on the business and the industry. But what I want you to do is plan for that. So you know how long, and you know why, and you know how you're gonna cover things during that time period. Okay, so a couple of definitions that I just kind of wanna run through before we do a couple sample income statements. Okay, so income is all money that comes in. So that could be money that you loan to yourself or to the business, money from a lender, an investor, and then money from sales. Okay, so that's any money that's coming into the business. Revenue is income from sales. So revenue is the money that we're bringing in, that we're paying. What do we pay on all revenue? What kind of tax? GET, okay. Okay, cost of goods sold is specifically the costs that are associated with that specific, with creating that product, okay? So this pen, right, it's the things that are associated with the cap, the plastic, the ink, the machine, the time, the person's time, that, I don't know what human involvement there is in making a pen. I'm sure it's terrible, but the pieces that went into actually physically producing this pen, okay? That's what we call cost of goods sold. Okay, that comes out of revenue. And then what we have, when you take revenue minus cost of goods sold, has something called marginal revenue. Okay, so let's say that we brought in a $100,000 contract to do a documentary, and the cost of the time, the editors, the food for the talent, like everything, all in all, let's say was, oh, and paying yourself, yeah, okay. Let's say that that was like 80,000, okay? But our marginal is 20,000. But there's a bunch of stuff that has to do with doing business that's not covered, right, in just the item itself. So a lot of folks price things just taking into account the cost of goods sold. That's like a very common mistake that small businesses do when first starting up, is just pricing the item itself and not factoring in the operating expenses. So what are some examples of operating expenses? Electricity,
Rent,
rent, cameras, equipment, cars. Yeah, gas. What about the owner's time sitting through workshops like this, doing the accounting and books, bookkeeping, right? Insurance, Paula talked about earlier, right? Sometimes you're just picking up insurance for a specific job, so that you could include in cost of goods sold, right? But your general business insurance, that's gonna cover you for all kinds of stuff, that's gonna be an operating expense, okay? So hopefully operating expenses were under 20,000 on this one, right? On this year, but operating expenses are gonna go into calculating when you're estimating as a business, okay, this was job one, right? Job number one this year, this is how it broke down. 20,000 can go towards operating expenses or the owner's profit, okay? Versus, so now we know, okay, let's say the operating expenses of the business as a whole for the year cost 40,000. Are we in the black or the red? Red. So now we know we gotta do something, right? So that we either can, what can we do? We can take on another job, right? That'll also have some marginal revenue that'll go towards operating. We could try to cut down operating expenses. We could try to cut down the cost of the good. We can get other types of non-revenue income like loaning money, which is what most people default to and is not sustainable in the long run. Okay? So this is what you want to start workshopping. This is what you want to start breaking out. Like, what do I have coming up this year? Or what do I think I can get? And what is that going to look like? This is the embracing the guessing part. This is the write it down and figure out, okay, if I do one job, where does that put me? Okay, now if I say I do job number 2, and let's say it's the exact same thing. Let's say it's another 100,000. Maybe we got a little bit of like benefit from this one because we could buy some things at scale. Now what's our marginal revenue? How much? 25. Okay, our operating expenses for the business are still at 40 because these are just overall, whether we got one job or 5 jobs. Okay, so now how much marginal revenue do we have altogether between the 2 jobs? 45. So are we in the red or the black now? Black. By how much? 5. Okay. Does this help? Okay. So start looking and thinking about what do you think you could do in the first quarter, the first 3 months? What about the first 6 months? What about the first 12 months? The further you get out, the more it's going to be guessing, right? But that's okay. Embrace the guessing. Go conservative on your numbers. Go what you think is more guaranteed or more likely. Okay. Okay. And then lastly, profit. So profit is going to be your 5, right? Your net income is going to be your 5. Okay. So next time I see you folks and I ask you folks and your businesses are up and running and I say, oh, is your business profitable? Which number are you going to give me? 5. Yeah? You're going to give me this number. Okay. All right. Because income does not equal profit. Okay. So kind of going to skip through incomes versus balance sheets. Just want to show a sample one. Go ahead and pass this around. So this is an example of a very simple income statement. The income statement is a period of time. It could be a month, it could be a year, but it's how much money did we make or spend and profit during that year. Oh, sorry. I think that's the one. And so your cost of goods sold. So just very similar to what we just went through. So your total income from various places. So I always tell people don't donate stuff, but if you got to, make sure you mark it down. Just making sure you're accounting for it, that you're doing it on purpose, that you know what the impact is, okay? Because I get it, sometimes you got to, right, for various reasons. Thank you. Okay, cost of goods sold. These are all make-believe, yeah? This gives you a sample, right? Similar to what we just went through. Okay, the next one that I passed out is our Cookie Monster. So the Cookie Monster one is the one that's a little bit longer. Sorry, I'm trying to look for where we have it. It looks like a really tiny written spreadsheet. Okay, so the Cookie Monster one is what we would call a pro forma. So this is estimating forward. You can do pro formas 3 years, sometimes people do 10 years. I think everything after 5 is make-believe, but you know, the idea is to project out into advance. Helps to show a larger picture. This is definitely usually required for loans. Investors, they want to see like what do you think is coming online. But basically all these exercises you're doing to kind of hammer out and hash through, thank you, kind of hammer out and hash through each job, each quarter, each month, what do things look like, that is all going to be wrapped up into filling this out. So you don't go straight to filling this out. You do the month by month, you do the job by job first. And then you start plugging in, okay, I think we can do this amount of revenue this month, this amount of revenue this month. What are the costs that are going to be associated with that? So this Cookie Monster guy has, you'll see under income, he has some cash on hand. That's the money that he made the month prior that he kept in. Okay. Non-sale income. So you see he has a $10,000 in February. That's $10,000 he loaned himself. He loaned the business. Okay. So I always tell people it's okay when you personally have set yourself up so that you're going to help float the business for a little while or pay for certain expenses, but make sure you mark it down because then you can pay yourself back. And that's an expense. It's not you paying yourself profit, so you're not paying net income on that. You're not paying taxes on that. You're just paying yourself back as if you loaned the business the money, right? So make sure you mark it down. Okay, you'll have your expenses, and then you have your net profit. Okay, and the only thing that we added below here is if you were to do it as a cash flow, then it's just tracking it, how it's flowing over from month to month. So you'll see what's at the bottom. We made some decisions about, okay, we're going to pay the owners some money this month, not this month. The rest of the money is flowing into the next month. Okay? This is just, again, to give you folks a taste, give you folks an idea. And it's okay to make assumptions. And what we usually say is just note them. So you'll see the far right column. It says, okay, we made some assumptions. For example, maybe you make an assumption that payroll is going to go up by 5% each year. Maybe you make an assumption that you're going to get a certain contract that you're like 80% sure you're going to get. So you just note, okay, this assumes that we got that contract in this month. Okay, so again, embrace the guessing, but make sure that you're noting it, you're planning for it. And of course, make sure that in this, you're paying yourself, okay? As an expense for your time, not out of profit. Right? You can pay yourself, you can disperse yourself the profits, but your time and your energy and your work is an expense of the business. Make sure you account for that. Otherwise, you're paying all kind of taxes on all kind of profit that you could have just paid yourself as a legitimate business expense. And then just remember that you're constantly going to revise. Yeah? Be ready for, there's going to be things that don't go exactly to plan. When you need to, you come back to your plan and you come back to revise it. So the last thing we just wanted to talk about from the previous workshop is just ways and types of financing for business, for startup. For a lot of you folks, there probably are grants. Most small businesses do not have grants that they can get for their products to get kickstarted. But for many of you in the creative space, there are in fact grants and investment revenue that can help come in to help kickstart an idea. And in many ways, they're basically just saying like, hey, we want to buy into the creative space and we want to buy more of what you're creating and make sure it's out there for public consumption. So we're their client essentially, right? They're someone that you're selling your product to. So there's equity generating and debt generating. That's just the major things that I just want to make sure you folks are thinking about in each of the different ways that you're thinking about financing things. Equity generating is stuff that's actually it's gonna be increasing the amount of equity and value of the business. Debt generating is things that you're gonna have to be paying back and flowing into the debt of the business, okay? For those that are thinking about loans, we do a lot of workshops and a lot of sit down and talk story with folks about how to walk through what a particular bank is going to look for, how to position yourself for that. So what I would say is like reach out to us or reach out to SBA who has lending as well. For those of you who are Native Hawaiian, reach out to Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We'll actually pay for technical assistance to come in and provide you support to sit down and go through what are all the questions, what are all the things that they're looking for from a lender perspective. And then lastly, I just kind of wanted to share, sorry, I have to skip through some of this, but I can go over any questions afterwards. Just wanted to share and ask actually if Leanne wants to join me, some of the grants and opportunities that are out there for in culture and arts. So I'll let Leanne talk to Pacific Islanders specifically, although I think you're gonna have a grant workshop next week, right? Next weekend?
Next weekend is going to be how to write a proposal. Yes.
Awesome, okay. So there are foundation grants. Hawaii Community Foundation has quite a bit of grants, and many are in their arts and culture space. Atherton Cook and some of the other family foundations as well especially invest in the culture space. So if there's an idea that they're interested in getting out, it's worth it to go and talk story with them. And then if they say, yeah, this is something we might be interested in, submitting a proposal to them. And then there are also public grants. So both the state and the city both have grant programs that include arts and culture as a possible recipient project idea.
And if you're interested in our funding, go on our website, picom.org, and whatever questions you have, then please email our VP. She will help.
Am I missing that sheet? No, where is that sheet? Is it up on this?
Is it not on there?
No, it's not.
Okay.
There's about 3 or 4 people, I think.
That are missing?
Yep.
Okay.
So I would just, I'll make sure folks get them. So I would just say as wrap up that you folks really started this from an awesome place of excitement and hope for wanting to create something for your communities. So hold on to that, be excited by that, continue to be excited by that every day. And write it down, right? So that you can remind yourself of it in those moments where things get frustrating. But definitely, rely on your support system, but also create new support systems that you can rely on and bounce ideas off of as well. Never forget to pay yourself. I'm gonna keep telling people that over and over and over until I don't have any more clients that don't pay themselves anymore. And just make sure you kind of know your costs. But please support one another now that you have this network as well. The resources that we provided at the first workshop, I'm just putting them back up here. They're on your first PowerPoint, but I'm putting them back up here for folks who are tuning in online. And that's it. Sorry we had to rush to the end. Thank you, and thank you again to Pacific Islanders in Communications and Olelo for having us, Solution Specific. We're excited to invest in your dreams, so mahalo.
Thank you, Vic.